right. Well, appreciate everyone coming tonight. My name is Jonathan Ward from Ward Technology. We're an IT staffing firm that started the Mobile Learning App 4 years ago. Basically, it's a free event. We host it monthly. We do take the summers off because attendance seems to, I guess, lessen during the summer months. Anyways, a couple quick things. Like I said, we host these monthly. If you have any comments, suggestions, feedback, a bunch of us are wearing the Mobile Lab shirts. So please feel free to reach out to us after the session tonight. Let us know if you have any suggestions for future topics, any suggestions on different themes or ways we could run these. Yeah, so that's pretty much the intro. I guess tonight we've got a DevOps panel. I'm selfishly really excited to see this. Appreciate you all coming tonight. I guess one quick question. How many of you are here for your first time tonight to a Mobile Learning Lab? Okay, that's a good chunk of people. Awesome. So as you've probably registered on our meetup group, please feel free to see what things we have coming up. The next session won't be until the fall, but we also will be putting these on a YouTube channel. So if people aren't able to make the sessions, they can check it out on the YouTube channel. So that being said, I'm going to hand off to Michael, and super excited to listen and observe tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jonathan and the team, for having everyone. Quick show of hands. Who's familiar with or knows about DevOps? Okay. Who would say is an expert? Who's really been into it, deep into it? No? So we've got a good mix. Everyone's familiar with it. We've got a great panel lined up for today. Start off introductions. Fawzy, do you want to start?
Sure. This is on. Okay, perfect. My name is Fawzy Manna. I'm a senior consultant at Deloitte. I've been doing for the last couple of years pretty much work focused around the area of DevOps, IT operations, software development, lifecycle enablement, that kind of work. And pretty much client-facing work, so get to recycle, go through a lot of experience, see a lot of the good, bad, and the ugly, on a day-to-day basis. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of this with you today and learning as well from my co-panelists.
Great, thanks, Fawzy. And Max.
Hi, everybody. My name is Max Yermakhanov. I'm a senior consultant at Object Sharp, Microsoft MVP in application lifecycle management, so on and so forth. You can look me up if you want to. The first page, if you Google me, the first page is mine. I'd like to think it's because I'm good, but it's probably because of the last name that might have something to do with it. Anyway, I do a lot of DevOps consulting, application lifecycle consulting, application lifecycle management consulting, CI/CD pipelines, and so on and so forth, right? I run an enterprise DevOps user group. It's also on the meetup. Look it up. We do have, again, we meet monthly as well. I think the next session is in June. It is on Azure and Docker. Sorry, containers in Azure. So, and again, we take the summer off. I take the summer off because I have a life, I hope. So anyway, thank you very much. It should be fun.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Max. And Stephen.
Beautiful. My name's Stephen Thurlbeck. I have a long history in mostly from a business side of things with a technology focus, moving the business forward using technology and reacting or helping to coach the business forward. And my take on DevOps has always been from a business side, despite being a technologist. So I actually straddle both sides of the fence. I straddle the good stuff these guys do as well as the business side of it as well. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm happy to see so many new faces. Thank you for having us.
That's great. Thank you, gentlemen. And so fantastic panel. To kick it off, Fawzy, I'm going to start off with, so what is this DevOps thing? What is it?
The million-dollar question. So I think if you actually search the web, and I tried this before, believe it or not, you'll see a multitude of definitions. And there was a lot of back and forth at some point. A lot of people feeling passionate. What is and isn't DevOps? If I were to look at it from a personal experience, I would say it's a way of doing things. It's a work style, if you will, for high-performing IT information technology teams that allows for primarily two things: higher speed to market, higher quality of delivery. The way I look at it, though, is agnostic, or not just in terms of products, but also in terms of experiences. So it's not just about delivering products faster to the customer. It's about reacting to things faster. It's about restoring service faster, about responding to customer needs faster. So all in all, I would say delivering better experiences faster to customers. And in terms of the work style itself, it would really apply mostly, although it does span really a big part of the organization. Mostly, fundamentally, it came to lean out that relationship between the development side of the IT team and the operations side of the IT team. You know, Agile existed for too long, and you know, a lot of the operations guys, you know, got really upset. You know, but it's a true story. we need to have the same kind of collaboration mechanisms, communication styles, and so on. And DevOps came to complete the end-to-end leanification of the process, if you will. So
That's great, thank you. And a great segue into next question. Max, what's the difference between DevOps and Agile?
The difference between DevOps and Agile, I'm going to give you my take on this. Like Fawzy said, okay, so long story short, Agile, the way Agile started is business people needed to talk to developers in order to get the faster feedback, get the product out faster, and so on and so forth, right? So over time, Agile, again, got better, and people got better at it, and they delivered features faster, products faster, and they throw it over the wall. And it's in IT's hands, which have totally different values and different motivations, let's just say. So that it stopped right there. So basically, you made all those improvements and you stop, right? Okay, so what do you do next? Okay, let's get IT involved. Let's get IT involved in that conversation. At the same time, let's get everybody else involved, security people, QA people, and so on and so forth, right? So when that started, Agile, in my opinion, I don't want to pick on Agile, but evolved into DevOps. That's my take.
That's great, thanks, Max. So from a company perspective, from strategy, where does DevOps fit into the strategy for a company, for teams? What's your take on it, Stephen?
I think the big thing from strategy is that you're seeing either a lot of small companies coming along who need to actually gain market share. Most of you will know that as you enter a market, the best thing you can do is get engaged, get your product out there, and you create a degree of entanglement. People don't like to move. So DevOps is really good at helping you push, as Max said, helping you get stuff into your IT infrastructure and your operation space very quickly. So strategically, it aligns with a growing business. It also aligns with some of the bigger companies who have gone from being service companies to being sales companies and being sales focused. And as you see the deployment of things like Salesforce.com or Microsoft Dynamics, and you see people pursuing their leads and pursuing their opportunities, it drives the business forward. So strategically, the businesses are growing, and they're growing out, and they're going out and winning new business, which means that they need to evolve their product. And that drives right back into our technology groups, regardless of whether it's development or the operation side, and it lines up directly with the ability of the company to get to market quickly. So it's a huge synergy for that, as long as your business buys into it. That's the big key thing there. More on that later.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Great introduction to DevOps, and there might be some questions from the group, but we're going to keep going through, and then at the end, if you have any questions, we'll bring them up. Looking a little deeper into the journey, the organization, the culture, you've got a lot of experience with it. What does a DevOps journey look like? What's the first step, Fawzy, in making that step?
Right. So I mean, in terms of, if you look at a transformation, so there are a lot of companies, certainly in Toronto, but I mean everywhere really. It doesn't really matter in terms of industry or age. There's a lot of existing infrastructure. There's a lot of existing culture. People are used to doing things in a certain way and fashion for a long time. So the transformation journey, in my mind, always starts with where you're trying to go. So baselining where you're at, where you're trying to go, and then having that understanding will allow you to set a set of steps to allow you to get from current state to future state. And that is it's not just technology or processes, but that picture involves your people as well. It involves pretty much the whole ecosystem. It's not any one thing. It's the principles, the practices, and the enablers. And the enablers are the technology and processes. So any roadmap or any transformation journey is really going to include all of these aspects as a part of it. So a typical, again, journey would start with identifying where you're at, where you want to go, and then setting up that roadmap that includes all of those aspects combined in order for you to get to where you're trying to get at. And people usually, it's very easy to get down the path of saying, I got to set perfect targets. I got to do it right the first time. I got one shot at this. But again, in the spirit of, again, Agile, we're just talking about Agile, that you do this in an Agile fashion and you learn as you go, because that's sort of the point. The point is that DevOps came to complete the feedback loop back into the very start of the cycle. And so you got to model that as you go along, learn, as you're transforming and transform better, sort of, you keep building the onion, if you will, the transformation onion, as some of us like to call it.
That's a great perspective, tying the DevOps back into the whole Agile transformation. And like you said, you don't always succeed, but you work for it.
Right.
That's great. So we always see this frequently in terms of startups and small companies and small teams. But I work for a big company, very traditional company.
Right.
Max, help me with this one. How do I bring DevOps into a traditional company?
Sure, but just before that, speaking of DevOps and onions, there's a saying on the internet saying that DevOps is like onions. It has layers, and the more you unwrap it, the more you cry. So,
The more you cry.
anyway, so back to the traditional company. Most of my clients are enterprise clients, where it's a big company. There's a lot of legacy stuff going on, so let's call them traditional companies, which you can't just change things overnight, even though companies try to do that. The best way, in my opinion, to do that is to start with a small project. Make a small project, small deliverable, let's call it a task force team, where there is a representative from each department, maybe not full-time, but at least partially, and let them work together. Don't let any of the processes apply to them, or at least let them to bypass some of the processes. Not talking about security, obviously. You still got to do that to some extent. But let them do what they need to do to get their job done, right? Apply DevOps practices, and so on and so forth. Once they see that success, take that to the next project. The next project may apply to another team, bigger project, bigger deliverables. It will basically mushroom. So that's, to me, the best way to do it. It's going to take time. It's the slowest approach, but it's the most reliable, in my opinion. Okay?
Can I ask something to that?
Yes, please.
Go for it.
So I think I really like that approach, and I would agree with it. Where I would caution, though, is a lot of organizations get stuck at that pilot, at that first, they'll say, oh, let's spin something cool and awesome. And then, the rest of the organization look at them and be like, we want to be like you. And the other guys be like, no, you can't. And I think the challenge becomes, how do you scale? So how do you take it? How do you really take it to the next level? And I mean, there is no magic sort of one way to do this, and everything else is wrong. But I mean, you'd want to, like you said, you'd want to try and be strategic about how you do it. Maybe work, for example, there is a lot of rollout strategies where you can start from the top of the stack, work your way to the bottom, or you could do it horizontally as well. I mean, preferably actually, you take a whole chunk and enable it all, and then move to the next stack, and then move to the next stack, and so on. It could be a service line, it could be a business unit, it could be whatever, but that rollout strategy is extremely important, or else people feel like you're stuck at that pilot, and then you can't. You don't see the way forward from it.
That's a great perspective. Thanks, Fawzy. So now, Stephen, you work from the business side, and from a social, cultural, how do you turn the organization? How do you get the buy-in, the support?
There's sort of three pieces that go along with this. I think the first thing, when you're talking about buy-in, you actually have to go and talk to the people who have money, right? Your boss or the board or whoever it may be at that moment in time, because DevOps doesn't come for free. There's a lot of free software out there. There's a lot of free tools. It's you can make your own. That part of it is free, but it does come at a cost. So you need to have buy-in, and you need to have backing. And I think the backing piece isn't just getting the money. It's also making sure that people understand that while we're doing this DevOps thing, that we're not doing some other things. This isn't another tack-on project. We actually need to prioritize this. If we want to get the results that we're targeting, we need to make sure that we set time aside to do DevOps properly. I think the other big thing, really, when you look at DevOps, it's all about the culture. This is a big cultural shift. Yes, we're introducing new technology. Yes, we're introducing new ways of doing things. But you need people to change the way they think, and you need people to change the way they react to things. And the cultural part of this change, and you saw it in Agile as well, there are still people out there who don't think Agile works. And that's true, and the same can be said for DevOps. DevOps will not work for everybody and everything in every situation. But I think the important thing is, you've got to get the culture right, and you've got to target those people in your organization where there might be they're smart people and there might be a little bit of pushback, or they've been there for a long time. The guy that you can, or the guy or the girl that you can often get is there's always that one older person in the company who comes in and saves the day. Wears the Superman cape and saves the day all the time. If you can swing that person around early on and get them on side, you're going to see that you have a very successful DevOps program rollout. But it really is getting that cultural change made. Okay, that's my point for later. But it's true, and look, and that sounds, it sounds harsh, but there are people that you will need to fire, and people are very leery of doing that, especially when you talk about senior people who are always seen to saving the day. These are the people who don't like to automate things because they like to do it themselves. They don't like to share information. They don't like to be monitored, right? We all know these people. They're in your organization, and and you're not really sure what they're doing, but something magical pops out the end. But if you ever ask them how they got there, they're not going to tell you about this, right? So, but they're very lean. They do it all by themselves. But those are people, and you're absolutely right, Max. There are people that often, or not often, but in my experience, with some degree of regularity, you need to enable them to pursue new opportunities.
Great insight into the real world and the everyday. So you mentioned tools and getting into the tools. Fawzy, can you tell us about the tool suite?
Sure. I mean, the tooling landscape is really broad. We have this slide that we keep using at Deloitte that we show to some of our clients. It's all like logos. It's like a sea of logos. So there's no shortage of tools out there. But I guess where maybe what we could start doing is talk about some category or capability areas.
Start with the capabilities. Yeah, overall.
So capability
focus.
areas. The first thing that pops in most people's mind when you say DevOps is continuous integration, continuous delivery. So continuous integration is really about.
What's the difference between both?
Sure.
Just for everyone.
Yeah. So continuous integration is about building a software package from sources, from pure version controlled sources, and converting it into a deployable package. So that the build process, going through initial test phases, maybe unit test, maybe a little bit of a sanity test, and then having that build package they end up throwing in an artifact repository that then other people, maybe a deployment process can take, and that's where we transition to continuous, the delivery aspect of it, taking that package and going through all the due diligence in order to deploy eventually to production. So and going through all the, making it sound easy now, but you just take it and put it in production. with all the in organizations you go through aspects like change management and release management and security and all of that aspect. So continuous delivery really cuts across a lot of these things. Nowadays, a lot of what the world is moving towards is applying I just mentioned version control, applying version control concepts into everything. So everything is becoming a service, infrastructure as service, and configurations. Configurations should be version controlled, infrastructure is version controlled, and all of that. So you bake your images. Idea of configuration management, where you sort of you have your cloud provider, and then you do configuration management to sort of they call it baking versus frying. You bake an image, but you fry configurations on top of it. So that's what configuration management is about, sort of tied to the concept of
Who makes this
infrastructure. Completely, I make it up. I'm just hungry right now, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
When you say version control, what do you mean exactly?
So version control. So if you use the source control. Yeah. So SCM. If you're familiar with SCM or source control, it's the same thing. Yeah. So and now also I'm extending talking about latter aspects of the life cycle. You're talking about monitoring and logging capabilities, and you're talking about the world now is moving towards combining we had a lot of buzzwords. Now we're talking about there's no more buzzwords to come with. So talking about combining buzzwords. How do you combine Internet of Things and DevOps? So the and robotic process automation, all in one package, and you allow your environments to monitor themselves and self-heal themselves, all with zero interference. Magic, exactly. And you allow your operation people to focus on more meaningful things that way. So all of these all these capability areas combined can be called DevOps capabilities. And in addition to a few more that I may not have mentioned.
It's a wide range, and it's okay if you go home and Google continuous integration and continuous delivery, and it takes a couple of times for it to click. It took me a few times, and then it finally, I get it now. So there's a lot to it, and a lot of logos. You certainly touched upon that in the slides, page after page. Max, maybe you can talk a little bit more about the tools and get into some of the ones you recommend. What's the suite look like?
Sure.
Enterprise.
Quick question. How many are here are developers? Ops? No ops? Seriously? One. Yay, there you are. Okay. What else do we have? Managers, BAs, QAs? Those people? Okay, awesome. Thank you. The reason why I mentioned this because for every type of a job, there might be a different type of tool set. First thing is Git. There's no way around it. I mean, if you know what the Git is. Yeah. All right, so source control. Get on with it. It is right now the hottest and the most popular, with the most potential out there. Right? There's other source control systems. None of them come close to Git. I'm not a fan, but I use it. Anyway, so get on board with that. So that's as far as the source control systems go. As far as the Agile planning, so there's a lot of tools out there. I forgot. So anyway, the Jira. By the way, Jira doesn't mean Agile, just so you know. A lot of people saying that. That's not the same thing. Oh, we're Agile, we use Jira. No, it's not. You just record, exactly, you're just recording information somewhere. So there's TFS. I mean, if you know TFS, Microsoft TFS, or Visual Studio Team Services, the cloud solution, that tool is awesome. Okay, and I'm not saying that because I'm a Microsoft MVP. By the way, that doesn't mean that I'm getting paid. I'm not working for Microsoft. I'm in no way associated other than they gave me that award. Period. It's a great tool. VSTS is free. Give it a shot. There's other. I keep forgetting that name. Anyway, that's probably not important. So the Agile planning, then the build systems. There's Jenkins. There's again ETFS. It has its own build system. Bamboo. There you are. Release management. So you have. Again, Jenkins. You have Octopus. You have TFS as its own release management. In TFS, it's all in one. Anyway, give it a shot. It's beautiful. Monitoring. There's a lot of monitoring tools out there. What's the next one? Logging, yeah. The deployment, right? All of that containerization. The configuration management. There you go. Configuration management. So there's a Chef, Puppet, Ansible, PowerShell design set configuration, and so on and so forth. By the way, how many of you know PowerShell? How many of you Windows people or Linux people? Just wondering. Okay, sorry. How many of you work with Windows? You might not necessarily be a Windows person, but you work in Windows. How many of you know what the PowerShell is? Yeah. Bash? Command line? Anything? Okay. So basically the bottom line is, start using that. That's where we're going. Everything is going back to the command line, going back to PowerShell. That's part of the automation, right? Because you have to write those in the scripts, whether that's through the Chef recipes or through PowerShell or through Bash, doesn't matter. So those will be the tools that I would learn. Those are the tools that are currently in the enterprise. As far as if you highlight the tools in the enterprise, Atlassian toolset, definitely. Microsoft, TFS, believe it or not, it's huge. Especially in banks and insurance companies, the big companies, because it makes sense for them, because it's so easy to scale. What else? Well, Git we talked about. Git is everywhere. Git, TFS has Git, so everybody has Git now. Chef is huge. Puppet is huge. Ansible is picking up. I don't know why. I don't really like that tool.
I like Ansible.
Docker, there you are. Docker is huge. Containers are awesome. I think, hopefully we're going to talk more about it later, but those are the tools that I would start with.
Just there you go. Exactly. I think cloud providers as well are becoming a big part of the ecosystem. That cloud DevOps area is becoming one big, capability area. Areas. Something I like that you really mentioned when it happens so often when people say, "I'm using Jira, I'm Agile." I sort of heard it in the context of DevOps. I'm using Jenkins, I'm DevOps. We do DevOps, we use Jenkins, and I just want to emphasize that point that it may not be the case. You could have upgraded all your tool stack to the ones that Max mentioned, and you're still not doing DevOps, by the way. So it's all really about how you use the tools. It's about the practices, the means, right? And how you practice the process, exactly the way that you do things, versus just we have the latest tools that Max mentioned in our stack, and therefore we're DevOps.
Give me a second. I'm still writing down all the tools that Max mentioned. Isn't there one suite?
Yeah, it's called TFS.
Okay.
By the way, one thing that you did mention, I want to disagree. There's no such thing as free software. Okay. It does not exist, especially in the enterprise.
I'll concede that point. But from a development perspective of small startup companies, you can actually make a go of it with inexpensive or free software. What did you want to know from me?
Well, extending from the tools, the capabilities we have today, and as a visionary being part of the transition, the changes with companies, do you have anything for the future? Anything from capabilities?
I think that there's a couple things that we've seen and will continue to see. I think that we just talked about containers. I think containers and microservices are going to continue to flourish. I think that's going to be a big part of our future for the next little while. So if you don't know what that is, take the time to understand what containers are. Take the time to understand microservices and be able to differentiate between containers and virtualization, because there is a difference and they serve different purposes. I think some of the other stuff that's going to come down the pipe, there's going to be machine learning in our space, and it will actually look cognitive services, and we're not just going to apply that to the software services we're providing. We're going to apply that to our delivery pipeline, and that's going to go in and it's going to help us with our automating our tests or removing the need for some of our automated tests. It's going to take us to the next level. I think that's a big thing coming down the pipe. I think from the future, not necessarily from a tools perspective, but from an organizational perspective, we talk about DevOps. In the last probably 12 months, we've started hearing about DevSecOps, where security is getting involved. You're going to see a lot more of the audit world, the privacy world, all of that coming further and further in, because by the time that you've developed something and you're handing it over to operations, it's too late to audit, it's too late to check for security, it's too late to check for privacy. So you're going to see a lot of that group get pulled into DevOps. And I think this is one of the beautiful things about DevOps is it really is it's not ill-defined, it's just simply not defined, except for the fact that the whole goal is to engage people, share stuff, and get good product to market in a very short period of time. Other things coming down the pipe that I see, I think you're going to start seeing a little bit of a change in the operations and infrastructure space. There's been a big push, and I think both of these guys have mentioned it. You get into some of these shops where they have monolithic applications or they're dealing with mainframes, and there are simply things you will never be able to migrate to DevOps. And you'll see that these operations teams start running in a bimodal space where some of the services are moving to microservices, or even if they're dealing with a small monolithic application, they're still able to get some of the benefits of DevOps out of it, and they're going to go through a DevOps process. But they also need to be mindful that there are certain things that will never migrate, it will never work, and they just simply need to accept that. I think that having a goal of converting your entire shop to DevOps, especially if you're a bank or you're a big financial institution, I'm not certain that that's going to happen, but I think you need to be looking at what you're doing, new development, some of your smaller development, move it to microservices, get it into containers, get it into DevOps. I think that's part of what the future holds, I think. Anything from you guys?
Yeah, sure. To add to your point, IT is changing a lot. It will be changing a lot. Developers will be changing even more, in my opinion, partially because of the serverless. The function as a service, the backend as a service, everything as a service, meaning that I only have to write that code once and it's sitting somewhere and I just have to call to it and I don't have to write it again. So that will change the developer job drastically, in my opinion. There will be less of the pure developers, more about like I'm a DevOps person, I do ops, I do devs, I do everything essentially, in my opinion. By the way, speaking of that, first there were devs, then there were DevOps, now there's DevSecOps. I like that ops is always the last thing you mention.
Well, to add just one point on the monolithic applications and the the back office applications and all that a lot of the organizations still have and will always have for frankly, there are some things. While I agree that maybe you won't be able to apply all practices on everything and you have in your pocket, what you might be able to do is have a few what we call cornerstone habits or foundational practices that you're able to migrate all applications to or allow all applications to use. Namely, for example, source control, as well as introducing a little bit of automation slowly but surely into the build process, the deployment process, the test process. It won't be the same as your mobile app or your digital app or your your front end applications, that kind of stuff. But there are some things that you can do to start there, and you can start. You can continue to push the envelope and see how far you get. You may not ever get 100%, but that's where a lot of the vendors are trying to play now in this space. Where how do you take a mainframe and what can you do with it?
I think one of the things, and I think we saw this with Agile, and we have to be careful about as when we're implementing DevOps about what we're promising, right? Because we often promise a lot, and we don't always deliver that. And it's not a magic bullet. It's not going to solve every problem that you have. And I think that when we start getting into some of these areas, I think the points made are you've got to leverage what you've already done, right? And you build that good habit and you start deploying it against other aspects of your business. But I think it's really important that while you make a good case for the philosophy of DevOps, that you make sure you don't oversell it, because overselling it will breed impatience in the people who are paying the bills and the people who have projects on the sideline. And you've got to get some wins on the board early on.
Great, thank you. Fawzy, what about packaged applications? Something we're not developing ourselves, but we're deploying, we're managing. How about that?
Right, it's a great segue actually. I mean, we're really on that topic, right? So just to explain, first of all, so packaged application, we're using that term to contrast, I guess, custom applications that are built in-house. Mm-hmm. So you have your applications that you yourself as an organization build inside, and then you have the packaged applications that are mostly like vendor-driven, off the shelf. That's right. You get a product, and maybe you don't customize it, or maybe you customize it in-house, but it's still the architecture is really dictated by the vendor, and that introduces some challenges because you don't know what you're getting oftentimes. And there's constraints in terms of what you can and can't do with it. Like I've seen some vendors take it as far as say, I will allow you to do certain things on my vendor app. I won't allow you to do other things, and you could do whatever you want at the end of the day, but I won't support you. So that's where some of the limitations are. Really, the architecture is not something that you can control largely, unless you start building microservices on top, and then you get a lot of complexity in your setup that way. But it's possible. But other than that, it's about really building good relationships with some of these vendors to innovation initiatives where you could say, try and push the envelope with them as well to try and see what is the art of the possible with these packaged apps as well. So that's, and actually vendors are starting to take steps because that's the way forward anyways. Anybody who doesn't take steps forward, even the big vendors, I mean, they won't be relevant in tomorrow's world, on today's world even. Like a cloud provider, for example, like Amazon, AWS, is coming up with services every other day, literally. And tomorrow they'll have everything. They'll have everything that a typical a big software provider provides today. And if these vendors are not able to provide you things like automated builds, automated deployments of their applications, all the features and capabilities that we talked about, then that's going to be problematic for their own pocket in the future. So.
Yes, many cases like that. I didn't name any names, but interesting perspective in partnering with them to move ahead as well. That's good. So Max, earlier we mentioned containers in DevOps. How do they apply?
How do they apply? They apply, one of the components of DevOps is infrastructure as code, meaning configuration as code. In which way you include your infrastructure provisioning and infrastructure configuration as part of your source control. So when you not only it's version control, but it also you deploy that you build it, deploy it at the time of the build and the deployment, right? Meaning that when I need to build myself a 2 web service and a database server, I actually build myself the database server and the 2 web servers from scratch. And they'll connect it, and then I deploy on top of it my application. Docker, or containers, better word, by the way, which is not new, it's been around for ages, it's just now Docker made it popular, made it easy. Containers make it easier because they're a lot smaller, right? I think Linux base is 19 megs or something? Teeny tiny, right? Windows containers, I think the smallest one right now is 600 megs, I want to say, but it's getting smaller every day. Less than a year ago, it was 2 gigs. Now it's 600 megs. Again, they're dropping things a lot, right? So making them smaller allows you to build it faster, to actually source control it, and so on and so forth. So in my opinion, and by the way, all of the containers are manifest files, right? So meaning that it's a text file. So which makes it easier to source control, it makes it easier to build from scratch. So Docker makes the infrastructure as code, infrastructure provisioning, infrastructure configuration on the fly easier. That's where it fits, in my opinion. And by the way, it's going to be around, so learn that too.
That's great. Thanks, Max. So, Stephen, we have a lot of solutions, but what are some of the things that DevOps doesn't solve? What are the areas it doesn't address?
I think that when you've got fundamental issues, if you have an architecture issue in your source code, your DevOps is never going to fix that. Right, it's not going to make your architecture okay. I think IBM has made some great strides in the mainframe space, but I still think mainframe is on the edge of DevOps, and I hope that it'll get pulled in. But and it won't change culture. I mean, DevOps really is a philosophical change in the way that you do things. It won't suddenly make all your people happy coming to work. You've got to get in and you've got to work with people, and you need to turn them. You need them to understand that by doing this, they get their weekends back, they get their nights back, they get a regular workflow. It was the same thing with Agile. When we went to Agile, all of a sudden you have a little bit more control over what's happening with your destiny. And it doesn't mean that there's no fires and that you're never on, there's never a problem, but it means that you have a more control, less unexpected outages, and when you do have an outage or you do have an issue, you're able to recover very quickly. So I think those are the big 3 for me. It won't change your people. You're still going to have to work pretty hard to get your mainframes and some of those monolithic apps into it. Although, as pointed out, you can start edging in. And if you have bad architecture or you just have a bad product, it's not going to help you.
That's great. Thank you, Stephen. Getting to the last section. So before we go, is there any questions on the tools capabilities? We've been going through that quite a bit. Any questions from the audience today? If there is, we'll be around after as well, but if you want to bring them up after. So now we're going to get into some of the challenges. You've all been through many experiences. Anything you can share? So, Fawzy, what are some of the challenges we can expect?
There are none. I'm
No.
kidding. No,
Names have been changed.
No. I honestly think the biggest challenges actually are with expectations usually, and we touched on this quite a bit. People usually come with DevOps as like DevOps, better, faster, cheaper. Better, faster, cheaper. People walk around the office singing the anthem about what DevOps is gonna give them, and how soon they're gonna get it too. So it's funny when you go to the stock market and invest, you don't expect immediate return on investment. So tomorrow, right now. 100% ROI. But for some reason with intangible things like software development and things like that, we expect it like right away. People go like, I'm going to take away half of your team and expect you to do DevOps. It doesn't work like that. So it requires some investment up front, and I think getting that message across is very important. How much investment it's going to take, how long it's going to take to actualize benefits. With the speed to market, which we talked about towards the beginning, it's also not immediate. You got to build capabilities from the left to the right slowly but surely, and you can't just build it in prod. You got to build it all the way from dev and propagate it upwards. So that takes time. So because it's about norms and it's about culture, and culture does not change overnight. And I honestly think that is the biggest challenge that I find in terms of what people expect DevOps will deliver to them or will give them. The other one, if I may, is just related to people changing work habits. A lot of the time what happens is, especially with transformations that are based on just products or vendors and things like that, what ends up happening is people find themselves using new tools. They don't know why. Nobody told them. Nobody explained anything, or nobody told them how to, or what benefit it's going to bring to their life. I mean, at the end of the day, I honestly think if I were to redo that question at the beginning about what is DevOps, I would say DevOps is about improving people's lives at work, like really, like developers and operators and security people. And if it doesn't do that, then people find it useless. They're like, well, why are we doing this? You gotta.
That's a great tagline. We should trademark that.
So these are the two challenges that I most frequently encounter, I would say. Yeah, so.
Okay, that's great. So Max, building upon that, what are some of the no-nos in terms of DevOps practices, things we shouldn't do?
The things you shouldn't do? Okay. First thing you shouldn't do is you shouldn't change people's job titles, and now they're DevOps.
Agreed.
That's just, I'm sorry that it doesn't work. Another thing you shouldn't do is, so you have IT department, you have developers, two different camps, hate each other most of the time, or at least don't like each other. One thing that you shouldn't do is introduce a third department, DevOps, which will be sitting in between. So because you're not going to solve anything, you're going to make things worse, because now you got 3 different camps who hate one another. Just doesn't work. You shouldn't rush things, because this DevOps is mostly about culture, mostly about changing people's attitudes, getting people to work slightly differently to make their life easier and less stressful, which, let's face it, it takes time. What else you shouldn't do? I don't know. I guess what you shouldn't do. Oh, I'm sorry. What you should do is you should start introducing ops into the DevOps. Okay, because there is no ops right now. There's a lot of cases where there's no ops in the DevOps. It's just, or there's ops only for devs, meaning that DevOps are there to serve devs, just make their life easier. It doesn't work like that. You need to take it to the next level, so ops needs to step up too. So
I'll just add one. Like, I think the biggest one, one of the biggest ones that I find is sort of dictating DevOps. Like, some people say, well, we know the DevOps. Here's how you're going to do it, and I think that's sort of a fallacy. It's just wrong by definition, right? I mean, if we're talking about a cultural transformation, there's you're implying that there's an aspect of grassroots, an aspect of people understanding what they're doing. So when you completely dictate everything DevOps to people top down, it's just the wrong way to go. Even though eventually, once you do all the right things, the training, provide people reasoning, you take them through maybe workshops, conferences, things like that, there will be laggers. And maybe at that point, you take more extreme decisions. But you don't start there. You don't start dictating what DevOps is going to look like in the organization, or what the tools are, what the processes are, and you leave zero room for people to decide, to explore, to experiment, to play, to learn on their own. That's right.
Great insight. And Max, I'm really glad you mentioned there is ops in DevOps.
There is one, yeah. Yes, there is. By the way.
I've
there
heard that
should be
before.
one. By the way, to that point, there maybe should not be you should not dictate, but there should be guidance with no micromanagement, hopefully. Speaking of the no ops, a couple of months, last year, I was sitting in the subway. I used to live in the city, and doing my own thing, reading or something, watching a movie, it doesn't matter. And there's a couple sitting next to me, and they're talking about the DevOps, and they're talking about the argument that there is no ops in the DevOps. I actually we got out of the subway. I approached them. We talked about it, and the guy was actually ops, right? The guy was the storage management. He was into storage management. And there's a lot of changing going on there, right? There's a lot of changes going on in storage management, in networking. It's huge. In security, in all of that. DevOps is in there. All the automations are happening. So, just good.
That's good to mention. And for everyone, there is a topic called NoOps. It's an extension of DevOps, and so good you mentioned that. So, Stephen, with your experience and what you've seen, what are some of the reasons DevOps fails?
I think we've hit on a couple of them here. I think slapping the DevOps team in the middle of operations and development is an absolute recipe for disaster. I think when you give a bunch of people a title that's meant, and you give them a role to liaise, when actually the liaising should happen between those two roles is a big issue. I keep coming back to culture. I think all three of us have mentioned culture tonight, and it is the single most important thing. If you have a couple of, and remember, this comes down to the old, not everybody who manages is a leader, and not everybody who's a leader is a manager. You will have leaders on your teams who are well respected, and if they won't go with this, your whole program will fall apart because nobody will get on board. You've got to get to the influencers not only above you to budget and to make time and to allow for these types of projects to happen. You need to identify the influencers in your organization and sway them as well and bring them around. And you do that by giving them the opportunity to go out and provide insight into how this is going to happen. I think one of the other big reasons DevOps fails is because we set high expectations, right? We don't take the plan to go, ROI is not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen over time, and this is sort of what we're leading up to. And I think that sort of breeds a certain amount of impatience, especially when there's a lot of companies that have sort of been, jaded on the Agile, where we spent a whole bunch of time doing Agile and training that, and we haven't quite, we're still on waterfall. So you need to set an appropriate amount of expectations, or you'll meet with frustration from the people who are paying the bills. We spoke very early on. If your company needs to implement DevOps and it's the right thing to do, and you have these influential people who aren't getting on board, those influential people sometimes need to go find work somewhere else. That will be one of the big reasons. I think the other reason we get DevOps failing, and I think Fawzy mentioned it early on, was that you get the tools, but nothing's connected and nothing's automated. And yeah, I'm putting it into Jenkins and I'm pressing a button, or I'm doing something manually in Jenkins. And then later on, I have a little script that I run manually. It's that you don't start tying these things together. When you go out, and my God, DevOps is confusing. When you go out and you start looking at some of these tools, they all seem to do the same thing, and everybody says, oh, we connect with everybody else. So it's not an easy road to sow. So you have to be prepared for a little bit of setback. You have to be prepared to fail every once in a while. But I think DevOps gives you a really good way to recover from that. So those are some of the big things, but I cannot emphasize the culture one and the expectation one enough. I think those are the two big failings where we don't get a return on investment or a perceived return on investment early enough. And I'll add one more, which really is sharing. Technology people, in my experience, are very good at doing things and never letting anybody know. Hey, we fixed this massive problem. We've never told anybody. DevOps is one of these things you need to be shouting from the rooftops, right? When you have a win, regardless of whether it's, oh, I can now configure a container automatically and I can have a new environment up and running in 15 minutes, right? A business person's like, oh, good, that's lovely. Well, what does that mean to that business person? And put it in business terms and sell it to the business as a business win. And turn those things not into technology wins, but into business wins, and bring the business along for the ride on this. Because everything we do in technology, there's no business. If there's no business, there's no technology. We'll all be in our parents' basements coding fun things on our computers. So that's the big three from me.
Just want to add something quickly, and just because it's something you said that triggered something in my mind. Actually, that's one of the answers to my first questions. What do you do? How do you introduce DevOps into the traditional companies? One of the things that you can do is introduce a change agent, whether that's a consultant or something different, that will help you drive that cultural change and help other people adopt DevOps practices. It works. And once they leave, again, that change agent, that they have specific job. They're there to help you change your processes, right? So they have no legacy, they have nothing, right? They don't have to, they have no Well, they have no baggage basically, right? So that's a good way to get things done. So consultants like me or him.
Gentlemen, thank you for touching on such a wide-ranging topic. It's amazing how a low-level technical function to start with is so much discussion about culture and change and people. It's great to hear that perspective. Now, we leave the audience with one last thing as we wrap up.
Go do it. Honestly, I think, look, the biggest thing is, we could spend, I've seen organizations spend literally like months, years strategizing. Let's get the perfect, and I touched on this at the beginning, perfect strategy. It's all about experimenting and learning as you go, prototyping capabilities, trying them out, sharing with others around you. And then once you do that, then you sort of have something to show around to people. And then at that point, it's easy to sell it too, eh? Like it's a lot, it's very easy to tell a story at that point and say, we built this and we have some small win and here it is. Would you allow us to scale it and get us some funding to do that? And at that point, it's a lot easier to do that. So at a personal level, try to play around, experiment and learn, but also in terms of creating simple prototypes at a team level to illustrate capability and show it to others. And I think that's how really DevOps can grow organically within an organization.
It's great to hear the connection with all the agile, lean startup ideology. So that's fantastic. Max?
Embrace it. It's coming. It's staying. You better learn. You better get on board with it now rather than later, because if you get on board with it now, you're gonna be ahead of everybody else. And again, it's something else is gonna come up that's gonna take you to the next level. So if you're not embracing it now, you're gonna be behind, a lot behind. So I suggest embrace it. Jobs are changing. Myself, for example, I have a master's in computer science. I'm working IT most of my life, right? That's just because that's the way things turned out. The way things are changing, it's gonna be even more like this, right? All of us are gonna be doing everything, a little bit of everything, right? So embrace it, read the book. If you haven't read the book called Phoenix Project, take a look at it. It is genius. It is so easy to read, and it covers on all the aspects, Agile, DevOps, and everything. And as you read it, you basically say, I know that guy. Oh, I know that guy. I hate that guy. I'm so glad that guy is fired. Anyway, so yeah. So it's a good read, and again, it's going to help you put things into perspective. So,
it's a great book.
It's based on a true story.
Who's read
apparently.
it? Who's read the Phoenix Project? Anyone? A few.
Yeah. The Phoenix Project. There's the next book's out. It's called DevOps Handbook. It's a bit more difficult to read, but that's because it has so much material in it, and it's not a fiction based. It's actually story based. So get a book, read the book.
It's a great book. I highly recommend it. Fair warning, you won't put it down. So start it when you have enough time to finish it, or you're going to work the next day going, oh, tired. Okay, great.
I think the big thing for me, going from development to management to consulting and all this kind of stuff, is when I look at DevOps, automate early in your process. As you're doing things, figure out automation and do it often. Everything you do can be automated. There's very little we do these days that can't be automated. Get that mindset going. Automate early in the process and automate often. Do everything you can to make sure that you and the people around you don't have to do anything to move your code or your container or whatever it is from one environment to the next.
Automate your tests. Everything is about test automation. There's no avoiding it. It's just there.
Thank you. I really appreciate everything you shared with us today. And great insight, great experience, and we've learned a lot.